My entitled Karen of a manager is screaming at me for not knowing how to work any of the equipment at the restaurant I work at. But after months of trying to have them train me properly on the equipment in this restaurant, I had finally had enough, deciding to quit right there on the spot, all because of their awful treatment towards me. And now, as a result, I'm being called a jerk, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. This story also came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. So to start things out, I got this job around 4 months ago with a very local and very popular place. I'm not going to say the company or where it's located because I'm definitely not going to give away where I live. But needless to say, I thought it was the perfect job. The pay was good and the work was surprisingly well balanced. And I thought it literally was perfect. That is, until I got to the job and started training. Training itself was terrible, along with the test that you had to take to make sure you learned. The trainer that was supposed to be training me was out for nearly 4 full weeks. And since apparently nobody else could train me, I was either repeating the same task or I was sent home early. But I tried to tough it out and be sympathetic. I know that people have their own lives, and I didn't want to make the training any harder than it already was for the trainer and co-manager of the store. Well, eventually, I began to get yelled at for mistakes I made when I had zero clue how to do the task. I had no idea how to make the food that they wanted. I had no clue on how to use the machines they used to label food. And mind you, I was supposed to be a cashier. I applied to be a cashier and not a cook. I hate cooking in the kitchens because I always fear I will mess it up, and that's honestly what happened. I was told to go and cook something for an order, but I didn't know how to use any of the industrial cooking machines. Mind you, the kitchen is tight and narrow, and I have no clue how any of these work. There was some machine that was used for the eggs. I mean, it wasn't a simple pan and stove. There was also a large deep fryer with all of these buttons and numbers that I didn't understand anything about. I was yelled at by the trainer and manager for being slow and messy while I worked in the kitchen. I mean, it wasn't in my job description that I was going to be in the kitchen at all while working. I can understand packing food and putting it together, but they wanted me to actually cook things. After the grueling day, I finally realized the red flags. The constant screaming at the simplest of mistakes. Mistakes I had no idea were mistakes since I didn't learn any of the machines or tools. And so, at the end of my shift, I was called into the manager's office. The conversation went on, and she said to me, "Your performance today was terrible. You need to straighten up and straighten out if you want to continue with your training." And the only reason why I was getting the second chance was because they were beyond desperate for employees. So after I had heard all of that, I finally snapped. But I didn't do anything drastic. I was civil despite how badly I wanted to punch them both in the face. I simply stood up and said to them, "You haven't trained me to use any of the machines in the kitchen properly, or even how to properly prepare the food. The communication between manager and employee are of a low level of quality. And you know what? I agree. I don't see myself performing well in this environment with you and your company. Thank you for your time and your training." And with that, I shook their hands and I just left. For context, they don't communicate well. I would be scheduled on days that weren't on the scheduled calendar, and I'd have days where I was supposed to work, but I didn't. After they called me multiple times to come in and asked me to stay just until they were able to find someone who was able to work the hours I was going to have, I decided to promptly block them. My friends told me that that was a jerk move and that the company was in a lot of stress, but I don't think I was in the wrong. So truly, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? You are absolutely not the jerk here. Let me tell you something. Your friends are completely naive. They seriously are going to sit there and be like, "Wow, that company really is stressed out. They really could have used you," or something like that. That is such a narrow point of view when it comes to work. It's not even funny. Let's kind of go back on what these people didn't do for you. They not only did not train you properly, but they then treated you like garbage when you didn't know what you were doing. Like, those two things alone are absolutely the mark of a bad manager, and it's a big red flag for me when working at a job. If your coworkers and your managers can't understand that a new person is going to make mistakes, then that is definitely not a place I would ever want to work at. Like, seriously, you weren't trained to use any of this equipment. You're staring at machinery that doesn't make sense to you, and you have a manager screaming down your back being like, "Oh, you gotta cook this right now." It's like, lady, what are you talking about? I literally was not trained how to do this properly, and there's a good chance if I do it wrong, I could get hurt. I don't know about you, but I can definitely see why nobody's sticking around. I mean, at this rate, they might as well etch the words "help wanted" into the glass on the door leading into the restaurant. Now, when it comes to you leaving this job and saying, "You know what, I'm not putting up with this anymore," honestly, good for you. I would have done the exact same thing. These people seriously have the audacity to be like, "Oh wow, you don't know what you're doing," but in that that same sentence, you could then be like, well, then why didn't you train me properly? Like, the reason why you don't know what you're doing is because the person criticizing you hasn't done their job. So overall, I don't think you're the jerk. Your friends have no idea what they're talking about. And honestly, you did not do anything wrong here. And I know that if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My boyfriend claims our shared home isn't mine and that he has full ownership over it, despite the fact that I pay so much money towards it all the time. So now I'm at a loss and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my boyfriend purchased a home years ago before I was in the picture. At the time, he was married and had a child with his ex-wife. He has purchased the house entirely in his name due to her credit and has continued to own it after they've separated. He is a retired veteran and receives a monthly disability check from the VA that is about equal to my salary. As we were dating, I started to search for a house to purchase. My budget was limited, so I didn't have a lot of great prospects, so I was doing it rather slowly but still actively looking. As we got more serious, he really pushed for me to just move in with him, especially since he had his daughter. I was hesitant, but eventually I did. I've continued to actively search for a house to purchase and save towards a down payment. I've lived here paying half the rent and utilities and most of the groceries for the last year. The other day during a board game, my partner and I were debating in what seemed like initially a friendly manner, and this was all over the meaning of a rule during the game. Then suddenly he got really aggressive. He said that his name was on the mortgage and that this was his house. So what he says goes, and he decided the way the rule of the game was going to be played out. And when this happened, this threw me off and made me feel horrible. Like somehow this wasn't our house and my portion of the bills were being discounted. This also happened about a week ago. Today, the conversation of common law came up, and in him explaining to his daughter, it led to us talking about the home and how things were divided up if we stayed together that long. Regardless of the how though, he states that my payment barely contributes to the mortgage and only covers the utilities. I pay half of the cost of living plus the groceries for all three of us. Frankly, I pay more than I view are my fair share and feel splitting the cost of the 2-bedroom home down the middle leaves me paying for a room that I never get to use that his daughter lives in. Now, reading some step-parents blogs, they pay based on the number of rooms. Plus, my grocery bill has tripled living here. I feel like I'm footing the bill for a lot of his daughter's living expenses, which makes me feel resentful when every time he drives home that I don't contribute or have any stake in this home. He's right that I have no stake, but I more than contribute with household costs and chores. But if I moved out on my own, our relationship would end. So it all feels really silly. I want to revisit how expenses are split because I don't feel secure in the way he's talking that I won't be left out to rot. I am much better at managing my money, and even with a higher cost of rent living alone, I was able to save more money living on my own. And since he keeps making it so clear that this isn't my home and that I don't contribute, I frankly want to focus on saving more and finish purchasing my own home. And really, I just want to leave this home and this relationship. What should I do? That is a massive red flag that your partner is acting that way. This guy literally was like, okay, well, I own this house, so I get to make all the rules for this board game. This guy just sounds like a hothead. Like he just sounds like someone who's gonna lose his mind over the smallest of things. And that is not fair in the slightest. Like seriously, this guy sounds really awful. And I mean awful in a way that would be really detrimental to your future in general. It also sounds like you're paying way more than you should when it comes to taking care of this house. And I think that's the part alone that would really make me move out. And you know what? You have said it out loud. You said you want to get out of this home and relationship. So I know if I was in your shoes and I felt this way, I would start that process right now of finding a new place to live and eventually moving out of that house and away from this guy entirely. Because frankly, the way this guy is acting is honestly inappropriate, and you do not deserve to get treated like that in the slightest. My entitled aunt in her 30s demands that my grandmother buy her a brand new bed, all because her current bed isn't memory foam. And I've honestly never seen more entitlement in my life. Here's what happened. So a few days ago, my aunt decided she wanted a new mattress, and so she went to her mom, who's my grandmother who I also live with, to go get her a new one. Now, this aunt is in her 30s and lives in her parents' basement in a room that was entirely renovated for her so that she could have a walk-in closet and everything that she could ever need, all including a brand new bed. She also doesn't work, so not a single penny any of that room was spent by her. A few more things about her is that she's entitled and racist, and can't stand when things don't go 100% how she wants them to go. Now, the reason for her getting a new mattress isn't really that bad. She suspected there was mold in it due to finding mold on her old bed frame and wanted to replace it since it had been a long time since she'd done so. But this next part is where she becomes a Karen. Her mattress, the one that my grandma bought her, brand new and entirely by her request, wasn't memory foam. Mind you, she picked out the bed herself and was upset that it wasn't memory foam. So this sent her into an absolute rampage. She began to stomp her feet, cry, and yell at my grandma, throwing a fit about how her bed isn't memory foam. My grandma, who's pretty tired since this just happened right now, just tells her that she doesn't want to deal with this right now and she'll address this in the morning. But when she said that, it set my Aunt Karen off even more. She began going on about how she can't possibly sleep on her mattress because it's not the right kind for her. My grandma even offered to get her a brand new memory foam pad for her bed as well, and even that wasn't enough. Eventually, my aunt just stormed out and left, and at that moment, nobody has any idea where she went. I do hope she's okay because it's late at night, and it did just snow like crazy. But at the same time, this outburst is ridiculous in my opinion. Yeah, that's a really weird reaction to somebody not getting their way. This adult human being is in their 30s, and they're freaking out that their mom, who's elderly and is a grandmother, isn't buying them a mattress. Like, seriously, what's going on here? To seriously act that entitled honestly blows my mind, and I just can't understand having that kind of reaction to not getting the right bed. Like, first of all, you picked out that bed yourself. You said, I want that one, and you literally got exactly what you wanted. Like, did she not try to lay on the bed first to see if it would work? Like, she literally has nobody else to blame about this but herself. So hopefully she is okay, but if she does come back, she's at least willing to see how silly she's being, because her reaction was honestly so uncalled for, and neither you nor your grandmother deserve to be treated that way in the slightest. My husband suddenly changed his personality a year into our marriage, and after dealing with a lot of his tantrums, I feel like I'm at such a loss, and I seriously now don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, for a bit of context, my husband and I have been together for 10 years, we've been married for 3, and we're both engineers. For the sake of this story, we'll call my husband Jay. That is not his real name. We had a wonderful relationship, and sure, we did have some conflict, but it was conflict that we spoke openly about and we tried to resolve. I always knew Jay's mom passed away when he was a baby, and his dad didn't talk about it, but he has a good relationship with his stepmom and sister, so I didn't worry. Before we got married, Jay was an awesome guy and my favorite adventure friend. We would travel and hike and go skiing, and then during COVID, we had to slow some of this down. And around the same time, he found out his dad lied to him about his mom's family, that they were horrible and mostly passed away. Well, it turns out that's not true. She had living siblings, parents, and cousins who were nice and very interested in a relationship with Jay. But right before our wedding, he didn't want the pressure of a big event to have them suddenly in his life. So I agreed we would continue to get to know them afterwards. A little over a year after our wedding, he was still super fun, but suddenly started having massive tantrums, where he would yell and break or throw things, and slam doors, which increased in frequency from never to about monthly over the next year. He also stopped doing mental labor to plan things as much, but also to repair the trust and relationship after this. Now, I admit, my response was sometimes successful and other times not so much. Sometimes I didn't accept his apology because I thought he was just going through the motions. Sometimes I must have seemed demanding when I explained the steps and reassurance that would help. But the worst part of my role was when his outbursts were truly terrifying for me. Despite trying to walk away or ask for kindness and patience to try and de-escalate, I ended up resorting to name-calling because it was the only physically peaceful thing I found that shocked him enough for him to pause. He went to anger management after we tried therapy, and the therapist referred him to an anger problem. Since then, he's been embarrassed to go to therapy, but he said it was a him problem and worked on it independently. Now he's finally stopped the scary and embarrassing slamming things, but just refuses to look at me and speaks really harshly in a quieter tantrum where he catastrophizes our life to me when he's in a bad mood. This change wasn't that helpful because now I'm just uncomfortable and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I used to be able to talk to him about anything, but now suddenly he says my criticism of his character surrounding his tantrums and his resilience and participating in our lives has caused this. this. Both of these are valid complaints. I mean, I did call him names when he would rage just to shock him into stopping, and this is only after I tried everything else, and sometimes I couldn't get over it easily. He also oscillates between saying how much he loves me while also saying that he hates me and that I made him this way. He went so far during his last tantrum to tell me that he only married me because he was expected to, which seems suspicious to me because I remember frequently talking about how young we were and that we could wait, but he insisted he wanted the rest of our lives to start sooner at the time. And now, after the past month, he legitimately appears to hate me entirely. Now, here's my honest question. Did I ruin the love by being intolerant of the tantrums? Is it unreasonable for me to believe that this is more of his drastic cycle through idealizing and blaming me? If so, is it reasonable for me to give him the chance to return to couples therapy and be accountable for actually working with his therapist? I also have a new technique to go for a walk or to a hotel when I catch signs of impending tantrums. Or does this guy honestly think that I ruined him for the rest of his life? In that case, I'm assuming I should just walk away, right? I'm honestly so confused and I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, in my opinion, I think his attitude and tantrums are so uncalled for. You are not the jerk for deciding not to put up with that. I know if I was in your shoes, I would feel the same way. I would not want to be yelled at about things that I did not do. It's one thing to have a civil conversation and try and figure things out, whether in therapy or just between the two of you, but it's another thing entirely for him to slam things and to start getting physically violent all over petty arguments. Seriously, this is a massive red flag in my opinion. So I think truly you're on the right track of figuring out solutions on how to figure this out, because his attitude and tantrums are not normal, and in my opinion, it absolutely needs to change if either of you are ever hoping to see success. My dad's friend made a joke that implied that she thinks I should move out, and now after thinking about it for so long, I'm now worried that this is actually how my dad feels, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I'm a 25-year-old female, and I cooked for my dad and his friends last night. It was my dad's first time gathering all of these particular longtime friends at our house, and my first time meeting them as well. We got along really well, and everybody seemed like great people. For some background information, I have a learning disability that makes it hard to pick up on social cues and come up with a quick response. I also have difficulty in school, so I've been going to university part-time for 6 years. I have 2 years left on my degree. I also work part-time and I make just barely enough to support myself, maybe about $10,000 a year. I live in a big city where apartments go for about $1,200 a month and student housing is more expensive. I moved out immediately at 18 years old and moved back home 2 years later during the last few months of my mother's life. My childhood dog passed away, and then my mom passed away 2 months later at 72. My dad would be completely alone if I wasn't there. After a few months, during which he had been healing and weekly therapy sessions, I adopted him a dog. He was ecstatic and spends most of his time playing with her and caring for her. My aunt, who is his sister, told me that she thinks adopting the dog saved his life. I spent my time studying, working, and watching over the dog when my dad is tired. I also helped him recover from major surgery in the past few years. He goes on vacation a lot, so I watch the dog, of course, when he's gone. Well, tonight at dinner, my dad told me he was getting beehives for the yard, and I joked that I was terrified of bees, and his female friend ended up laughing. I laughed with her because I thought it was funny, and then she said something that honestly blew my mind. She said, "Well, they'll be here by spring, so you have a reason to move out by then." Everyone laughed, and so did I, because it sounded like a joke. But now I'm laying here in bed, and the thought just intruded into my brain. Why did she say that? Did she and my dad talk about that? My dad kind of paused for a second after she made that joke, and it looked like his brain was just a loading circle before he laughed. I took that as if he disagreed, but didn't want to say anything since everybody was having fun. He has expressed sadness to me before. When he misunderstood something I said as I'm moving out. Then he showed relief when I told him that wasn't what I meant. I'm on antidepressants again for the first time in a week after not being able to renew my prescription. The side effect I get from adjusting to a higher dose is panic attacks. And right now I'm laying in my bed panicking that my dad is telling people he wants me to move out behind my back, or that she wants me to move out for some kind of reason. My dad doesn't see her often. He just started catching up with her again after she said something about vaccines that he disagreed with a few years ago. But at least that's all I know. I really want to text him and ask him, "Hey, why does your friend want me to move out?" And I really want to do that first thing thing in the morning. I'm a very direct person, but I'm also afraid that that will open up a can of worms that I will regret opening. What should I do? So I totally understand where you're coming from here. It really did seem like there's some kind of plot going on behind your back, also that you can move out of the house in some kind of way. But on the other side of it, it really seems like your dad enjoys having you around. So I really think it would be a bad idea to discount how your dad feels about you. He clearly likes you. He clearly likes you being around, and I think it would not serve you well to jump to conclusions. So if I was in your shoes, I would do exactly what you have planned. I would talk to him directly and see exactly what's going on. This way you can know exactly how he feels, and you can then know the truth, regardless of whatever jokes his friends might have made. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.